Hello everybody. Thank you for taking the time to watch this screencast. This video will take you through the project overview. I will be posting another video shortly for group members on how to get started using the project website. In that video we'll cover how to log into Citrix and how to navigate the site. Group leads, you should already be online at this point. I did put out a video and sent you guys an email regarding how to get started and the separate group lead page that you guys will be using to coordinate all the project tasks. If you still haven't gotten that email or are still unsure, let me know or wait for our Friday meeting where we'll cover all that and make sure everybody's online. I'm going to do my best to keep this video to less than 10 minutes just for brevity's sake. In this video, we're going to be covering these items here. We're going to be talking about what we're doing here, what this project's about. We're going to talk about why such a large project, and you'll see the complexity here once we start talking about the different aspects of this. I'm going to show you some diagrams here that will hopefully better illustrate the bigger picture. We're going to talk about the project overview in more detail and give you a little bit more detail on what to expect. We're going to talk about how we're going to go about doing this. This is a lot of this project is to also test how an organization of our size and with our diversity can collaborate without spending a lot of money and time coordinating a lot of people to come into a face-to-face meeting. We'll talk about the expectations of the groups and what to expect next. So let's talk about why we're doing this. Originally, this project started with a question regarding intern track. Everybody at this point in the organization should be fairly familiar with intern track. It was created in 2007 to move our static evaluation process for new employees and remedial employees and promotional employees from a PDA that sat in a filing cabinet and really didn't give us any insight into how the program was performing, and it moved it online into a dynamic form. Currently in the database there are 6,163 shift evaluations, and within those shift evaluations we've collected just shy of 20,000 call evaluations. And within those evaluations we've used Likert scores to measure different domains of competency. And what the question came up was, how meaningful is that data? We have an awful lot of data, and that's a big thing within our industry is there's not a lot of understanding of how competency and knowledge progression occurs. And what we came up with is there's little meaning to the data that we're collecting and able to benchmark against because we really haven't defined what it is people are supposed to be doing. After we determined that there was really little meaning right now coming out of the data that we were collecting because we had nothing to benchmark or measure it against, we started looking at the rest of our system. How are we measuring psychomotor skills? Is the skills fair that we're doing, is that increasing our provider's ability to perform better? The IV pump is the perfect example. The question came up is, are people able to use the IV pump better because we're doing these skill fairs? There's a lot of considerable variability in provider-to-provider performance. It's difficult to measure these things quantitatively, but I think everybody would agree that depending on what truck, what provider, how long they've been doing it, that there's a considerable amount of variability. What we need to establish in our organization, as others do, is a minimum standard, a minimum competency where you can expect everybody to perform at. And then we asked, can we efficiently train our entire agency if we had something that popped up that needed to be addressed? If we had a new technology that we needed to implement, could we do that? And the biggest question, and probably the one that's faced us, that we've been challenged with over the last 5 years, is, can we evolve? Our industry is constantly evolving and arguably is going to evolve the most in the coming years, and can we evolve to that? Can we implement ultrasound? There's a technology that's emerging called laboratory on a chip, where our ability to be far more diagnostic at a hospital is going to become a reality and arguably almost a mandate. This diagram helps to kind of illustrate where I think we are and where we'd like to go in terms of competency. The graph on the left attempts to, or diagram on the left attempts to illustrate a 2-year competency period, or 2-year recredentialing period, where if you measured over time, if you're able to quantitatively summarize knowledge and competency across the agency, I'm pretty sure it would represent almost this bell curve, where the peak of the curve right in here would represent the peak performance or peak competency of our system. And over the 2-year time frame, that competency would decay over what we'll talk about in a minute, something called skill decay. And the peak where it starts, the uprising part of the graph, is when providers start touching material again, looking over guidelines, opening up a paramedic book, refreshing on things that we as humans will naturally regress on over time. What we're hoping to do is create this continuous competency where providers are continuously competent at a certain level, and whatever that level is for our agency that we define. And we want to ensure that we constantly revisit and update on knowledge and perform deliberate practice on seldom used psychomotor skills to help create that continuous competency. I won't spend a lot of time on the science of this, but I think it's important to illustrate that a lot of this is based on science, and other industries, nuclear power, railroad, space travel, aviation, and in some aspects medicine. A lot of this stuff is based on science and has a lot of measurable components to it. In science, we ask questions, and we try to find ways to validate or learn from or discover from those questions what the reality is. And when you ask what competency really means, how do we retain and learn new knowledge and ability, you emerge with words like skill decay and retention, where skill decay refers to a loss or decay of training or acquired skill and knowledge over a time or period of non-use. Think of the stuff we don't typically use often. Intubation being one, surgical airways, pacing, things that people tend to struggle with. And from my place in the organization, I can see that there are these skill decay examples that occur almost every day. And what is the relationship between knowledge and application? With our current recredentialing process, every provider is asked to take a test, and I think if you would compare test scores to actual provider's ability to apply that knowledge, I think you'd find a considerable disconnect between the two. The knowledge exam isn't necessarily representative of the quality of care that's provided. And the science of how we start out as novice performers and we move to that expert level, when we talk about human factors or applied psychology, we're talking about how humans perform and the factors that influence outcome. Accident and failure is oftentimes a misnomer, or a lot of people don't truly understand what that means. Failures aren't necessarily bad. Certainly we try very hard through policies, practice, education to prevent failures, but failures we learn a lot from, and in most cases, particularly an organizational representation of it, we define failures as acceptable or unacceptable. An example of an acceptable failure would be something that was done by accident, or through no prior choice, where you happen to do a math error or something that was not intentional. An unacceptable error would be something that you hide, something you lie about, something you try to cover up, and you don't really learn from. The power of failure is learning a way not to do something, and failures in themselves are powerful because they teach us and remind us on an emotional level why those failures are bad. This diagram here is a very renowned diagram of what they call the Swiss cheese model of system accidents. It was developed by Dr. James Reason, which is he's an applied psychologist that looked to understand how accidents happen. And what he found is that accidents are not just one event that causes a failure or accident. An accident is a summation of multiple events that fit together, in this case like pieces of Swiss cheese, where all the little holes align in just the right manner that it would cause the accident or failure to occur. And when we talk about accident prevention, if you remove just one of these slices of cheese and misalign these holes, it's oftentimes enough to keep the accident or the failure from occurring. Think plane crashes, medication errors, and the like. And this is what we're trying to create, is a system of constant error prevention. This diagram represents the 8 domains of competency, and I show this just to illustrate how complicated it is to describe practitioner competency. What does it mean to be a competent provider versus an incompetent provider, and how does that change over time? Certainly you can measure somebody's competency, which we do very well through school and through your initial vetting process of becoming an employee and during promotional events, but we really do poorly during that intermediate step or that long-term step of somebody that remains as a quote-unquote credentialed provider for a long duration, and we don't really have a good mechanism to ensure that those people are performing in the manner that they should be performing and that we expect. Within the manual that we're going to talk about here momentarily, there's quite a bit of reference material that goes along with why this is being structured the way it is. There's a lot of ways to go about this, and this is pulling from many different industries and other organizations. We're not recreating the wheel here. We're not developing the next iPhone, as some have heard me say. We're basically applying knowledge that's already known to Lee County EMS. How does it work best for us? And with the training department as large as ours, with all the FTOs, the 2 lieutenants, the 2 captains, and the deputy chief position, we have plenty of people to create such a system that is applied to us instead of going out and purchasing something that's canned or that wouldn't really give us a positive outcome because of the meaning of the information. But this helps to understand all of the elements that go into training competency and how that applies to human error, skill decay, individual versus system failure, and so on. If you're interested in learning any more on the science stuff, research aviation and human factors in Google, and you'll come up with a significant amount of information to understand what's been tested. Project complexity. So this project originally started out as a proof of concept to develop one aspect of this training manual, which we are working on, which I'll talk about here in some coming slides. We wanted to get 10 or 15 people together to help develop one module or one curriculum with a bunch of modules to understand how it would work and do a little test case. We expected, in this top left graph here, this represents all of our road staff. There's just shy of 300, and this includes captain and below that represent the actual operations, the hands-on doing the work component. We expected about 10 to 15 people to want to help, and that's anecdotal or objective from prior projects. And this would represent about 3% of our road staff of the organization. The response was pretty staggering. It was 5 times what we expected and represented just shy of 15% of our entire agency, which compelled us to come up with a different way, a way that would utilize as many people as possible, but still in an efficient manner. This bottom right graph here shows the distribution of those interested based on role. We actually had people from the outside of the organization that saw it posted on LinkedIn and Facebook that wanted to help. And you can see there's a great sample of just about every aspect of our organization here that is participating, and it's been a challenge, but definitely a needed challenge to utilize these people for their talents and diversity in a way that would, like I said, still produce quality work. So some have asked, why go through all this? Why not just, get a group and write it ourselves? And I think when you start looking at the science of what defines happiness, motivation, ownership, and quality in a workplace, and you start looking at a research domain called behavioral economy, and there's a behavioral economist named Dan Airley that gives a great TED talk about some of the research him and his team have done on what motivates people in the workplace, what creates happy employees, and it's well known and well researched that happy employees improve quality, and in the private sector, they improve revenue. Certainly, we're not revenue driven or revenue conscious, but there's a lot of other aspects, which I'll show a diagram here in a minute, that will represent those for our organization. The key is ownership and getting people involved. There's a lot of that research that shows that people that are involved, that are stimulated, that get the opportunity to innovate, are happy or have more meaning in their job, which leads us to a lot of very positive things. And frankly, with this type of the way the project is being deployed, we're actually going to save cost in the fiscal notion of cost, but cost in time and energy, trying to get a large group of people together, even at 15 people together, to meet and to work through this. I believe, and we're going to test through this process, that setting up this project the way we have will lend to a better quality product at the end. So the big picture. So what does this mean for our organization, and how are we going to apply all of what I just talked about into this project? This diagram, and hopefully it's clear enough for you guys to see in the video, and if not, there will be a PDF version of this in the project website. We're going to start on the right. This diagram helps illustrate what it means to train, at least in as I see it, and as I've pondered these questions. Let's start on the right, which defines the why. So why do we train? And we'll start here in the bottom right. So we train as an organization so we can improve safety, quality, have a better agency culture, improve retention, reduce system variation, which you probably heard Chief Tuttle talk about with regards to standby. Patient care is obviously the big component of why we train. We train as a system, as an organization, to provide better patient care, customer satisfaction, reduce error and failure rates. But for me, the most important reason that we train is for our people. And without training people, and without knowledgeable, competent, safe, and happy people, we never obtain quality patient care. We don't meet these benchmarks of performance. And we certainly, as an organization, don't ever get to our full potential. So the training is based on our staff, those that go out and actually do the job, the EMTs, paramedics, and assistant staff that go out that make this job possible. And when we look on the left side of this diagram helps define the how and the what, or the what and how. So what does it mean to train? And once we define what it means to train, how are we going to go about delivering that training? So what we're doing here is we're going to talk about this top rung of the training manual. What does it mean to train? And how are we going to break out the different aspects of training in the organization? And this is how, at least in this first draft, we've come up to do it. We've defined 3 different academies: new hire, recredentialing, and promotion. Within each of those academies are different curriculums. So, for example, new hire, we have new hire EMTs, we have new hire paramedics. An example in the recredentialing, we have recredentialing EMTs, recredentialing paramedics. In promotion, the promotional academy, we have promotion from EMT to paramedic, promotion to FTO, promotion into leadership, and in the future, promotion into community paramedicine and other aspects as healthcare continues to be redefined. Within each of the curriculums, we have modules. So within paramedic recredentialing, as an example, there are 9 different modules that represent the different components of what it means to recredential a paramedic. And from those modules and those elements within the modules, we come up with learning outcomes or objectives. And this is the key. This is what all of this work is meant to accomplish, is give us something to measure against. Give us a something that we say we're going to do, and we can then later on see if we're meeting those requirements. Just to talk about the other aspects of the diagram, just so they're a little bit more clear. Content delivery talks about how we take the modules that we've defined and the objectives within those modules, and we apply them to our organization of almost 300 people. And we can do that through many different mechanisms, education management systems or online learning platforms, where you define learning modules, self-guided or group study. We give tests or quizzes. In services where we do group work, deliberate practice is a big component of ensuring there's no skill decay and knowledge decay. Assessing psychomotor skills, instead of teaching them, actually having somebody demonstrate them and utilizing that as a mechanism for deliberate practice and ensuring that the quality's there. And then through a quality competency assurance process where we review the processes, we analyze the data that we're collecting, and we benchmark those learning outcomes with other key performance indicators to give us that loop back. Are we doing what we say we're going to do? So here's a flow chart of where we are and where we're going. So right now in the yellow is what we're looking to do in this project. We're looking to define a training manual. We're going to define the why and the what. And we're going to do that through developing the modules for the different curriculums within the different academies. And you'll see in the project organizational chart how we're going to break that down. The next step will be content delivery, the how part of what we're doing, and this will include those learning management systems and services, mini lectures, simulation, practice, and the like. The next step after that will be the quality assurance component. How are we going to ensure that we are doing what we say we're doing, or we wanting to do? And we'll do that through data analysis, committee, skill checks, quizzes, exams. And then how are we going to ensure that this information is relevant, current, and applicable to what we do? And that will be through a review mechanism where we'll constantly keep the curriculums and the modules updated. And an example of how that can be accomplished would be, say, through a curriculum committee. So project overview. Like I said in the previous slide, we're going to be creating a training manual, the kind of Bible of what we're going to be doing, how we train in the organization. We, as a group, are going to write that first draft of the proposed training manual for the organization. Here is an example, it's probably pretty fuzzy, of the first page of the draft table of contents. And what I've created is just that framework of the manual without content. And for all the reasons we talked about, and for other reasons not mentioned, it's important that you guys that do the job, that understand what it means to do the job, write the content. And that will hopefully increase the ownership of the content and the reasons why, instead of having something handed to you and say, this is what we're doing, and like it or not, we're going to do it. This picture here is an example of what one of the modules look like. So the way this is structured at the top, it gives you all the information of where you are within the manual. So Academy here, so this is the New Hire Academy. This is the EMT curriculum within the New Hire Academy, and then this is Module 1. Module 1 is set up, and all of the modules are set up almost identical to this. The difference will come within the prerequisites, objectives, and assessment sections. So each module has a prerequisite. Typically, to move from one module to the next, there is a requirement of successfully passing the prior module with a certain grade on a quiz. Within each module are objectives. What are you supposed to accomplish? What are you supposed to review? So this being the New Hire EMT first module, it's going to be a lot of the first day stuff, county orientation, things that we're covering already in the New Hire Academy. And a lot of this is based on that. We did a Six Sigma project a number of years ago where we actually identified this stuff in module form, which probably led us to this project today. And here is the assessment section. How are we going to ensure that the objectives are being met by the individual, and making sure we capture the opportunity to teach or re-educate on things that are being missed. This is another example. So under Academy, this is the Recredentialing Academy for paramedics. This will be Module 1, which will encompass airway and pulmonology. Prerequisites as before. The section component or objective component is defined a little differently. Here we have different subsections: anatomy and physiology, patient assessment, treatment guidelines, documentation, and current research and literature. So this is what your groups are going to be defining, these components here, for all the academies. And I'll show you a breakdown of the different academies and curriculums and how the groups are being broken up. But this is the content. So for Module 1 through 9 of paramedic recredentialing, you're going to define all of these. This is the project overview, and this is what we call project management, and it's very similar to the incident command system. This is what's needed to be done to ensure that a group of our size can work efficiently together, and people know where to go for the information. So the basic breakdown, and I'll start at this level, is each group. There's 7 groups. Each group has group members and a group lead. Group leads are responsible not for directing the group or not for telling you as group members how to go about coming up with the information or what information. It's to organize you in a manner that's efficient, to keep you on track, ensure that you're turning in work on time, and help answer questions. They're there to enable you to do your work better. Group leads will all coordinate with the other group leads. So for example, for EMT and paramedic recredentialing here between group C and D, these 2 group leads will coordinate together for some of the shared content, or the content that would be alike in the different modules. All the group leads will coordinate between myself and Todd and the rest of the leadership team to ensure that everything's on track, and if different project questions come up, they have a place to go for that. The leads Todd will be the point of contact. That way, we're funneling all the questions in terms of training structure and whatnot to one person. So how are we going to go about this? And certainly from that org chart, I'm sure most people are thinking this is a very daunting task, and arguably it is. It's very ambitious to get this many people in one group together and come up with quality work at the end. And to do it in the time frame, I'm hoping we're going to be able to do it. So we're going to work together as a team. We're going to spread out the work, and we're going to utilize that project management or incident command system. We're going to collaborate primarily and almost exclusively online. We're trying to keep a lot of the challenges with group work down to a minimum, which I'll talk about here in the next slide, through the online collaboration. And this is becoming big with technology now becoming so readily available and inexpensive. Our ability to use very powerful tools online that used to only be available to large corporations is accessible to us within the county and within our organization. We're going to be using a server-side technology called SharePoint, and basically it's a social or collaboration site to go to work together. The way it's being set up is every group has their own project website, where just your group members and lead will work. The group leads will have access to add content and to assign tasks to the group members, and group members will have access to all shared documents. We'll be able to see and participate in group discussion, ask questions, and to get to reference material to help make the work more efficient. Group leads there's one main project website that the group leads will coordinate back to, and this is where I set system-wide or group or project-wide objectives that group leads get assigned and will have the obligation to update with the completion of. There's going to be a getting started video. The group lead should have already seen the video, and hopefully if you're not asleep by now, you'll look forward to seeing the next one that talks about how to get started. We're going to do this in a fashion which is called a hackathon style, and hackathons is in the geek and technology world of how large companies like Facebook, Netflix, Amazon develop functionality and complicated code by basically setting a time frame and encouraging and motivating people to develop that functionality or that new analytic ability for almost a reward or an outcome. Online collaboration. This is something new. This is something we've never done in this organization, and probably arguably in EMS from an agency level has probably not been done. We're hoping that this will help focus us on the task and the content and not so much of the logistics of meeting and all the social components of getting a group together. It's challenging getting people together, especially in our organization. We have people on different shifts, different schedules, money's an issue, time is an issue, and then at the end of the day, and frankly, it's been researched in the private sector that a lot of face-to-face meetings are not productive and are a waste of time. And we're also trying to reduce something called groupthink and different cognitive biases. Groupthink is a psychology term that we use to describe conformity behavior that groups of people display while working together. It's an unconscious attempt to minimize conflict and reach consensus. And probably the most scary idea of this or example of this would be, jury discussion. And cognitive biases are a deviation in judgment or decision making, and it's a lot about it's out of the scope of this screencast to talk about cognitive bias. But if you Google groupthink or cognitive bias, you should get a pretty detailed wiki page on both of those topics. So what are the expectations? And I assure you I'm almost done talking, and I know I've definitely gone over the 10-minute mark. So the expectations are we're going to work together, we're going to collaborate as a group, and we're going to develop something that we all can have a little piece of ownership of. Obviously, and this goes without saying, but unfortunately there are some that they need to be reminded of this is be professional. This isn't Facebook. This isn't a private blog. This is a county computer and county server that's open for anybody to see. There will be people visiting this work because of how new and ambitious it is. So be careful of what you put online. Only type something that you'd be willing for everybody to see, especially when it comes to the discussion sections. Complete tasks on time as assigned by your group leads. Ask for help if you get stuck. We're going to set a timeline for this, but we still want quality work. This is your opportunity to be innovative. This is your opportunity to be involved and to help make some decisions that will hopefully guide the organization as we move into the future. And most importantly, have fun doing this. If you're not enjoying doing the work, then there's probably no reason to be doing it, or there's some flaw there that we need to work on. And so what's next after this? The group work, like I said, is going to go over 2 weeks, and we'll announce when that starts. And we're going to make sure that everybody gets online and gets into the system, and we don't want the tool that's supposed to help you collaborate better be the component that is that hurdle that prevents you from doing the quality work within the established time frame. Once we finish the group work, the group leads will submit all your group's work, all the group work. We're going to review and summarize all of the information, make sure it's relevant and current. And then the technical writing component is where we actually take all of your work and we put it into the actual document. We'll go through a proofreading component. Some of these steps haven't been thoroughly discussed in terms of the logistics behind it. Certainly, I think with this group putting the ownership in, we probably will ask you guys again for your help after the technical writing to maybe do some proofreading and ensure that what we've come up with as a final document is sound. And then we're going to talk about the content delivery. So if you remember going back to that flow chart here, we're right here in the yellow, and the next step would be the green. So we'll talk about the how of how to deliver the content that we say and the why and what within the training manual. Thank you all for your time, and hopefully this wasn't too boring, and look for more screencasts. I promise a lot shorter in the future with moving on, and